Just a heads up to the student media who are live. The president is in the building. And as I mentioned, Dr. Robert G. Bottoms is the president of DePauw University. He's been our president since 1986. He is going to deliver an opening statement and then answer your questions. We thank you for coming here today. And without further ado, here is President Bottoms.
I too thank you for coming. I believe you have in your possession several documents that sort of trace the history of this relationship. You'll recall that in December, the Delta Zeta National Sorority delivered letters to 23 of their members asking them to take alumna status. The letters were delivered just before final exams. To say the timing was unfortunate would be an understatement. I think you also have a copy of my February 19 memo, my reprimand to the National Sorority. In that memo, I objected to several things. One, the timing of the letters, the disruption that it caused the students, and the process that they followed. School was out. We had winter term in January. And so when the students and I returned to campus in February, I had interviews with numerous students who were involved, both students who were asked to remain in the sorority and students who were put on alumna status. I had conversations with our faculty and came to the conclusion, as opposed to some of the pieces written in the media, that race had nothing to do with this. But I also came to the conclusion that the approach that the National Sorority had toward addressing what they considered to be their problem is incompatible with the approach that the university has in dealing with our students. Now, what do I mean by incompatible? In the past few days, my concern has continued to grow that postings on the website of the National Sorority seem to blame our students. I have been proud of our students for the way they have handled the situation. What the National Sorority has placed on their website is a totally different story than what I have heard from our students. We very much disagree with the posting on their website citing a media freeze. The very nature of DePauw University and a university is public discourse. And so I came to the conclusion that our approaches to these issues are just incompatible. The final thing I would say is I have been somewhat pleased with the discussions on campus, the reflections students and faculty have on the way we live our lives together here. Some students are working to start a local sorority. Some students are working to start a co-op. And so in some ways, I think the discussions are turning into a very positive thing. So that would conclude my opening statement. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Dr. Bottoms, how were you able to rule out the racial issue?
My belief about the racial issues is that I talked to no student who felt race was an issue.
What will happen to the girls who are still members of the chapter? There's 5 or 6 of them that have chosen to remain with Delta Zeta. What happens to them?
4 of the young women will be graduated. My letter, which you have a copy of, I think, states that they will not be allowed to open next fall. So we will find housing and work with the 2 women who are juniors who are members in good standing. Yes?
That means then that effective in September, Delta Zeta will no longer exist on campus. Is that correct?
That's right.
Thank you.
are you going to start some kind of process for a new chapter to replace them, or is the university going to have?
Well, I sort of don't want to rush to answer that. We're very open to being approached by either a national sorority or looking at the alternatives of some local sororities. I think we need to have a little time to be able to answer that. We don't have any plans today.
What kind of response have you had from the national sorority since sending out that letter?
If you could just raise your hands before you ask a question. Excuse me, there are lots of questions and the answer down there. I apologize for interrupting.
Okay.
Just trying to make sure everybody gets what they need.
Yeah, what kind of response have you had, if any, from the national sorority after sending this letter?
Today?
Yeah.
I've had only one response, which was an email from their attorney asking for the name of our attorney. I think we realize that today we live in such a litigious society. I was not surprised, but there was no content in that message other than, could we have the name of your attorney? I'd rather talk to him than to you.
Dr. Bottoms, you said there was no racial discrimination. Was there any other kind of discrimination that you noticed where the girls discriminated against because of their looks?
The problem I have with your question is you said that I noticed. What I'm comparing is what the young women have told me, and that is incompatible with what the national told me. It's very difficult, not having been in the room or part of the process, to know. I was concerned that the young women reported that their interviews were not very much in depth. Some said they really weren't interviews at all. So I can see how they understand things, and I've come to the position that I do believe our students.
Did they indicate that they felt they were discriminated against because of the way they looked?
I think that's been fairly widely portrayed by them.
Will the university start taking action against other chapters that have had problems such as hazing or et cetera like that?
Well, we're in the process of adopting new standards across all of the Greek system. I'm not aware of any other thing that would rise to this level of incompatibility. But in the future, naturally, we would take action against any group that doesn't uphold the standards of the university.
Dr. Bottoms, do you feel that all this has hurt the reputation of DePauw University, at least on a national scale?
Well, I don't feel that it's helped any. And I'm not trying to be cute. I was asked by a reporter from the local paper when all this started and we found out about the New York Times, did I think it would help us. I think what it has done is focus attention of people who really don't like Greek systems. It gave them a chance to say something. Some people have interpreted one paragraph of the New York Times as indicating that race was involved. I don't happen to share that. On the other hand, I've had many emails today, the majority of which have said, thank you for doing this. We think the university has handled things properly, and we're proud of the university. And as I indicated, it has given us a forum to talk about some of the improvements we're making in the system at DePauw.
Can you, hi, I'm over here.
Sorry.
Sorry. Can you be more specific with the improvements you all plan to make to the Greek system?
Only one for the present time, because my report to the Board of Trustees is not due until April. We're still discussing some of the issues on campus. We will have a new housing standard that does not allow a fraternity or sorority that houses our students to disrupt their lives in the middle of the term by moving people out. In other words, not honoring their commitment in September to house students for the year. I know that will happen.
So you plan to have more, and you said by April you need to present that information?
Yes, and this was a process that was begun long before the Delta Zeta incident started. It started a year ago with the Greek Fact-Finding Commission, and we have various task forces looking at all aspects of our lives. This has been going on all year. It culminates in April.
This incident, has it caused you to maybe add some things to that list that you weren't initially looking at addressing?
The housing standard, and there has, which I just mentioned, and there's also been enough talk on campus about stereotyping and debating whether it exists or not, that students have organized a lot of discussion groups. I think the Pan-Hellenic Council on campus will be proposing some reforms in the way rush is handled so that it's much more informal. And so these discussions among our student leaders, I think, have been very positive.
You talked about meeting with the students involved, but who else did you consult with before deciding to make this decision?
I met with a group of students who sought me out. I've had 2 meetings with the students who decided to stay. I had a consultation as I made up my mind with 2 of our trustees who are involved in the Greek affairs. I taught, one of whom was our board chair. I wanted him to be fully informed before I sent these letters.
Were the concerns about the list of concerns that you had that prompted your action, were your concerns about the assessments of these students' appearances the most troubling part of this? And do students of all appearances have a home in these various organizations around campus?
Well, that's a very difficult question to address because I've been criticized at times for my earlier reprimand. I've tried to stick to the facts, and the facts were what I mentioned earlier. The timing was very poor. They were disruptive to our students. The students thought they would be able to choose whether they could stay or not. Those are facts. Those are irrefutable. When it gets into what happened to any individual woman, I wasn't there. It's hard for me to prove that. Was I concerned by the image portrayed in the press? Yes, I was concerned. Was I concerned with the statements of the women as they described to me what their interview was like? I grew more concerned. Certainly our women, if you've read and are aware of their statements, felt that they were discriminated against, and I've come to the point that it seems more reasonable to believe their account of the events than what I've heard from the national.
Dr. Bottoms, I was wondering if you could maybe put this decision that you made today into perspective with the history of the university. I mean, has anything like this happened before? Has anyone ever asked a sorority to leave the university?
Not a residential sorority or fraternity, to my knowledge. I assume most of the people in this room realize what a strong tradition the Greek system has at DePauw. We have 2 Alpha chapters founded here. We, like some other top-tier liberal arts colleges, have had a Greek system for well over 100 years, and we've simply not been put in this situation before. We didn't have a standard that prohibited somebody from asking a large majority of their members to leave the house on such short notice in the middle of the year. We didn't have a standard for that because it's never happened before. I also want to make one thing very clear as we use terms associated with the sorority. I am not now, nor have I ever been, concerned over the behavior of the DePauw students. I think they have been very mature. I think they have been very well accountable of themselves, both the young women who were asked to leave and the women who stayed. We have over 1,200 Delta Zeta alumni. Our issue of incompatible approaches doesn't spread to them. As a matter of fact, I grew of the personal opinion in talking with some of the young women who were asked to leave that if our local alumni had been doing the interviews, I don't think this would have happened. Our quarrel has been with the national all the time.
President Bottoms, for a long time, the university has been seen as a separate entity from these Greek organizations. In fact, the houses are owned by the Greek organizations and not the university. So there's been a very big boundary between where DePauw University has say and where they don't. Is this a line that you think should have been crossed?
Well, I think you've put your finger right on one of the problems, and it's one of the big issues I think the university faces, and that is what kind of relationship we enter into with national organizations when we don't control their rules or their behavior, and it's certainly causing us to take a very serious look at that arrangement. We can't control the policies of the national sororities or fraternities, but we can impact what's best for our campus, and I think that's what has happened here.
Dr. Bottoms, what role, if any, did ethics play in this decision?
I must say that that's a question I've been asked a lot of times, because some of you may realize we are building and starting a new ethics institute. I'm not, well, I think the word I would use is what I said a bit ago. What it has chosen, you can put your own words on it, is that the university's approach and the sororities' approach are just incompatible in the terms of the way we deal with issues of selection and the way we relate our actions in public. Anything else? I'm beginning to feel like more of a president than I am.
Yes, thank you. I understand that from a correspondence that you sent to, I think it was the alumni. I don't want to quote it because I can't remember exactly what it said, but you said something in there about wanting to maybe not restructure, but look at the sorority fraternity issue again, maybe put a new face on that here at the university. Do you see a problem with the system as it is now, and if so, what is the major problem that you see?
Well, we had started a system, as I mentioned a minute ago, over a year ago, to look at health and safety conditions, to look at ways we could use both sororities and fraternities to reduce alcohol abuse on campus. We identified new member recruitment and as one issue we wanted to look at. So I've been, absent this one issue, I've been very pleased with the quality and the level of conversations that have gone on around this. And I do believe it's possible, and the words I use with that we can learn from this and use the discussions going on campus to build a model that other institutions might emulate. I think one of the things that gives some of us pause is that many of the national sororities and fraternities operate on a quote-unquote big campus model. We don't have any idea that every sorority or fraternity ought to have 90 members or 100 members. We'd like for our students to be in control of those decisions.
So are you concerned there is a problem with the sorority and fraternity system as it is now? Did you have an understanding? Or did,
Well, the trustees have affirmed that it's very much a part of our tradition. When I use a word like improvement, I don't mean to imply that it's abysmal to start with. I think many of our alumni and many of our current students would testify that we have a system that allows them to use leadership skills to serve one another in a very fine way.
Other questions? Thank you all for coming. Dr. Bottoms, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks. Be right with you. If anybody has any special needs or additional questions, I'll be in the area here, so feel free to ask.